Yellow Brick Road, Chapter 29. There weren't really enough blankets to go around, and the monkeys had already nabbed most of the palace stock. Ozma was sleeping peacefully with her head pillowed on Lulu's back, and I paused for a moment to look at them both. Lulu was still snoring gently, with her mouth open, looking a far cry from the fierce warrior I'd so recently seen in battle. And Ozma, was she still really in there somewhere? I'd seen her in moments of clarity, but none of them ever lasted long enough to give me faith that she'd be back to normal anytime soon. I'd been fighting Dorothy for so long now that I'd never given much thought to see what would happen when she was finally defeated. If Ozma was still loopy, who'd take over? The Gnome King wanted it to be me, but I was tired of being a pawn to someone else's story. Knox was right. I don't belong here. If Dorothy's shoes had taken her back to Kansas, they might work a second time for me, too. Once I defeated her for good, I was going home. Gnome King or no Gnome King, Oz would have to solve its own problems. Gert, Glamora, and Mombi had drifted off, to find private chambers of their own, probably. But as tired as I was, I didn't want to go to sleep. Instead, I walked out into what had once been the Tin Woodman's gardens. The gardens were probably well kept when he lived there, but they'd long since been overgrown and gone to seed. Still as broken down as they were, most of the worst of the fight had been far enough away from the palace that they weren't even worse for wear when they'd already been, save for some trampled patches and scattered spot for blood here and there. But elsewhere, flowers bloomed in the moonlight, huge, nodding blossoms that reminded me a little of Delilah's, singing in the wind and releasing little puffs of perfume into the cool air. A swarm of big winged butterflies drifted past, flapping velvety soft wings and singing a tiny, almost inaudible lullaby. A big yellow moon hung in the sky so low that I thought I could touch it if I climbed up high enough. Like the moon at home, this one had a face. Only Oz's moon was a gently smiling woman who reminded me a bit of Gert. I wasn't sure how long I'd been standing there when I realized Knox was next to me. "You should go to sleep," he said. "Tomorrow will be—" He didn't need to say it. We both knew. But sleep was the last thing I could think about. Suddenly he grabbed my hand. I startled at the warmth of his touch, the feeling of his skin against mine. "Look," he breathed. "Night-blooming Tyrium." "What's that?" He held a finger to his lips and beckoned me to follow him, tiptoeing toward a tall plant the size of a sunflower. "Be totally quiet," he said into my ear, his voice sending a thrill through me. "If you frighten it, it won't bloom." He settled down on his haunches to wait, and I squatted next to him. He was watching the tall plant as intently as a cat guarding a mouse hole. The seconds stretched into minutes. I fidgeted. He put one hand on my knee to caution me and left it there. All my senses totally felt alive. His sandalwood smell, the heat of his body, the movement of his breath. He smiled. But he wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the plant. A single pale tendril was unfurling from the top of the stalk, as slow and elegant as a ballet dancer pirouetting across a stage. Another delicate frond followed, and then another, waving gently in the night breeze. The tendrils sent out shots of their own like a silken spiderweb, weaving itself in front of our eyes. Slowly the strand knitted itself together into a huge white flower, sparkling with moonlight and moving back and forth, almost as though it was a will of its own. I realized I was holding my breath, and let out a long, slow exhale. The Tyrium flower was beautiful and impossibly fragile, a reminder that no matter how comfortable I got here, Oz would always be an alien land, governed by rules I didn't fully understand. The Tyrium blossom turned toward me, and then exploded silently into a stardust of tiny white lights, like fireflies that swirled around us and drifted away across the grass, where they caught on leaves or branches, and they hung glowing until the soft white light finally faded away. The flower was so gorgeous and so fragile, like everything good in this crazy world, like hope, like whatever had started between me and Knox that we weren't allowed to finish. I felt my eyes filling with tears, and Knox reached up to brush them away. "I forgot Dorothy didn't destroy everything beautiful in Oz," I said. "She didn't destroy you." "Not for lack of trying," I said, and then realized the implication of what he was saying and blushed. I was grateful for the darkness that hid my flaming cheeks. My mom would have loved to see something like this. I wish I could have said goodbye to her at least, I said quietly. You're not going to die, he said fiercely. Not tomorrow, anyway. I hope not. But I meant when we come back to Oz, I want to go home somehow. But let's face it, I'll probably never see her again. I just wish there was some way I could have told her I love her. You can see her, Knox said. He pointed to a puddle of water at the base of a Tyrian plant. Closing his eyes, I remembered the scrying spell. Gert had used to show me an image of my mom back in the Caverns of the Wicked. I bent down for a closer look as powder flowed from Knox's hands into the clear water. At first all I could see was grass and leaves, but then the surface of the water shimmered and grew opaque, and I was looking onto the living room of my mom's new apartment. She was sitting on her couch, her eyes red as though she'd been crying. Jake was sitting on one side with his arms around her, and on the other. Dustin and Madison? I breathed in surprise. Dustin was saying something while Madison nodded, bouncing Dustin Jr. on her knee, and over all of them loomed Assistant Principal Scranton. There was something in my mom's lap, I realized. Something they were all looking at. A leather-bound book with charred edges. Dorothy's journal, I exclaimed. My mom has to have gone through my room after the tornado and found it, but if they realize what it was, they might figure out Oz is real, Knox breathed. They couldn't, I argued. You don't understand how hard it is for people from my world to believe in this stuff without seeing it with their own eyes. If they believe what the journal is, they'll probably just think it proves that Dorothy was a real person, who is totally bonkers. A strange feeling crept down my spine, warm, heavy, and itchy, like a drop of molten metal rolling along my vertebrae. But I thought, I said, trailing off as I leaned toward. Assistant Principal Scranton looked up as though he could sense me, and then impossibly, his eyes met mine. They weren't Assistant Principal Scranton's angry eyes. They were silvery pale eyes of Gnome King. I gasped. He smiled at me and put one hand on my mom's shoulder and the other on Madison as they turned the pages of Dorothy's journal. Don't forget, Miss Gum, how much you have to lose. His voice slid through my thoughts, and I flinched. Remove our little friend Dorothy, or do not, it is no matter to me either way. But I will come for you very soon, and then, Miss Gum, what you will do will matter very much to me indeed. I gasped aloud as his thoughts pushed into my mind, as if he was just trying to show off how easily it would be to control me. No, I thought fiercely. The boots sent a warm pulse of magic through my body, and the Gnome King grip loosened. Do not think your shoes are enough to keep me at bay for long, Miss Gum, he hissed. As suddenly as it had come, his hold on my mind was gone. The vision of my mom's living room burst like a bubble popping, and the puddle evaporated with steaming hiss, knocked me back to the ground. Amy, Knox was shaking me. What happened? What did you see? I was groggy, and my thoughts were sluggish, as if I'd just woken up from a long bad dream. The Gnome King, I said thickly. He's with my mom. He said he's coming for me. Knox breathed in sharply. Coming for you to do what? I don't know. He doesn't care if we kill Dorothy. He's got something else in mind. Knox was silent, thinking. I don't like this, he said finally. I laughed. You think I do? But we have to kill Dorothy, even if it's part of the Gnome King's plan. I think you should give me the shoes. I shook my head fiercely. So far they protected me. They helped me fight off the Gnome King just now. I don't want to give them up. Don't want to or can't. We both know what he meant. Dorothy's red stilettos fused to her feet, had transformed her into a monster. I had nothing but my intuition to tell me that my boots wouldn't do the same thing. It was entirely possible that they were transforming me already, that giving me a feeling of protection was just a trick, but I couldn't use magic and stay myself any other way. And there was no way I was going to go up against Dorothy without the ability to use my power. Promise me something, I said, not taking my eyes off his. Just in case. Depends on the promise, he said. He was standing so close to me, I could feel the heat from his skin. I had to bite my lip to keep from kissing him. These shoes, I said, gesturing to my feet. After tomorrow, if they turn me into, Her. If I try to take them off and I can't, I want you to promise me you'll do whatever you have to get them off. His eyes widened. It won't come to that. Knox, don't lie to me. It can come to that, so promise me you'll get the shoes off no matter what. Even if you... I took a deep breath. Even if you have to cut off my feet. Even if you have to kill me. Amy, that's crazy. It's not crazy, and you know it. I never wanted this for you. I'm so sorry that this... He made a helpless gesture. I know. Promise me, Knox, I said. He opened his eyes and looked deeply into mine, as if he was trying to drink me in. I promise, he said. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. We looked at each other for a long time. Good luck tomorrow, he said gruffly, glancing away. I wanted him to say something else, to find just the right words to tell me everything was going to be okay, to tell me that he'd find a way to be with me, that he'd find a way to help me and get home, but instead he turned around and walked away from me, back into the woodman's palace. I followed, telling myself the pain in my ribs was just exhaustion, and not my heart breaking into a million little pieces inside my chest.